This is a Vox AC30 handwired that came in to be modded. It didn't get my full range of mods, but it got some of the most crucial ones. I'll get to what's modded. First of all, let's talk about some issues with the handwired series. You can see I've got the Mercury Magnetics Haddon clone output transformer, new holes drilled for the transformer, and I've got stainless steel screws, then spring washers, then some washers to reinforce. I've got some caps nuts on the back. That's solid. You'll notice that I've got one silver screw and the other ones are black. This amp has 4 screws which help hold this part of the chassis to the rest of the chassis. All 4 were loose as it came in, and I tightened up these 3, but this one was stripped because they have little machine screws that are just grabbing a little bit of the chassis on the other side, and it's not a nut inserted, welded into the chassis. It's just threads drilled in, and it's stripped. So I drilled this one out and put in a stainless steel machine screw with a nut on the other side, and it's got a little toothed washer. It's very important to keep the whole thing rock solid, and that's a place where a lot of them mess up. This is the first time I've had to replace that, but I tightened these as a matter of course. I don't think I've shown that before. The mounting hardware for the choke was loose. I tightened that. The mounting hardware for the power transformer was loose. I tightened that. The hardware on the power and output switches was loose. I tightened that. Every nut on every pot was loose. I tightened those. I tightened up the nuts on the switches. Those were a little bit loose from the factory, etc., etc. The jacks were fine on this one. They're often loose. By the way, if you have one of these, don't go in there with pliers. Don't go in there with the wrong tool. If you have amps which have this kind of nut, and you're going to find this on Voxes and Marshalls, all kinds of stuff, go get a 5/32 socket wrench. Tightens perfectly, tightens evenly, doesn't mar it. I guess these can be tightened a little bit. Let's do that while we're in here. But this works for Cliff jacks, it works for Neutrix. Pretty much it's a standard thing. There's a couple of amps out there where the nuts look like this, but they aren't really. Get that focus better. And so this doesn't always fit. Sometimes you got to have the next metric size. But the right tool for the job. And I've got all kinds of sockets for these switches and stuff, because you don't want to damage the hardware. You don't want to bang up the chassis. If I tried to do this with this, I'm going to chew the whole thing up. If I try to go in there with this, it'll just put horrible rings around it on the chassis. It'll just eat through that metal. You really want to have everything correct, to the point where you might want to put some, if I had to go in here and tighten up a nut and I was worried about the chassis, this isn't the right size, but I would put tape on the chassis where the metal of this were to make contact, so that as I turned it, it would not be making a line of contact metal onto the chassis faceplate. Just a little bit of low-tack painter's tape can be your friend. So let's go to what's inside. Okay, as I mentioned in previous videos, the leads on the Mercury Haddon don't quite reach where they need to go over here on the hand wired. So I put in a terminal strip here, high quality. It's a good solution. More on that in a little bit. Now, I'm not going too close because I get people asking me questions all the time. Hey man, can you tell me what mods do so I can have my tech do it? Or I'm in Europe and I'd love to have you work on my amp, but just tell me what to do and I'll have someone do it. I give out an awful lot of stuff, but some stuff I need to keep to myself. If you have a tech who's capable of doing this, they don't need my help. And techs who aren't capable of doing this don't need my help. But as an overview, I will say that I replace things with higher quality parts. I change some values to be what's found in actual Voxes. I change things to be a little more musical, where the switch was never on a standard one. I give it some different sounds that were available on the real ones. This one now pretty much goes between the normal and brilliant channels of a non-top boost AC30. Some stuff's for reliability. You know, these new screen grid resistors, these are 3 watts, much better than the 1 watts it came with. Better caps all around. I set the bias so that the tubes are idling perfectly. I make sure there's a lot of space between the cathode resistor and the output bias and its associated capacitor. In stock form, this amp has 47 microfarad, 47 microfarad, 47 microfarad, 22 microfarad, 33 microfarad. The JMIs would have had 8, 30, 8, 16, 16. Given the availability of modern caps, and that 30 was kind of the part that the JMI had, I go with 10, 22, 10, 22, 22. You're not going to hear a difference between 16, 16 and 22, 22. But with the F&Ts that are available, the 22 is a 500 volt cap, the 16 is a 450 volt cap. Given that the B plus on these is not that high, you could use the 16s, but I find that these fit very well. 10 is close enough to 8, 10 is close enough to 8. Yeah, 30, 22 is a difference, but we're also getting an extra, 8 microfarad of capacitance here, so it all balances out. On this one, I've not changed out the pots, which is my preference, but you know, the 60 millimeter alphas are not going to fail. I do change out the terrible sounding ceramic disc caps that they use with some nice sounding ones. Certain resistors get changed in material, certain resistors get changed in value to reflect drift in 60-year-old AC30s from the JMI era that I've serviced. Let me show you one little thing about that added terminal strip. Okay, here's the added screw which holds that terminal strip in place, and that's another place where it would make contact with the wood on the rear panel. So what I do on that is I very carefully, where is it? Sorry, it's hard to look through the lens of this as I do these. I drill a hole so that the screw can go into the wood. You know, there's a stock one there for that other screw. I do the same thing here, and since this is just MDF, once I drill that hole, I put some super glue in there just to stabilize it so it won't continue to fray or let moisture in. And while I've got in this area, the stock sockets in these amps are pretty good. I do change the grid stoppers from the original value to give a little smoother sound to work better with current production EL84s. And you'll get a chance to hear this amp in just a bit. Side note, but I think an important one. A couple weeks back I did a video saying that modern amp companies use crappy screws and they strip from single use. And a guy gave me some pushback on that, said I didn't know what I was talking about because I said pot metal when I meant sheet metal. You know, okay, be that way. But anyway, this screw is one of the factory screws that holds this wood panel to the chassis. It's a machine screw. It's one of the black oxides. It's been used once. At the factory, they inserted it once. I've removed it. I'm about to put it back. It's already beginning to get deformed a little bit from that. So it's not the kind of thing that needs to be replaced a lot on this series because you can access all the fuses without taking it out. If this amp down the road needs to be replaced, it's a standard M4 screw. I think it's an M4 27 millimeter or 25 millimeter. It's not hard to find, but you know, I'm not making this up. A screw that's been used once, a machine screw which has been used once, should not have any deformation.